Put what I thought was going to be a simple question up on Facebook. I'd been doing some reading, some studying on this week's topic of integrity, and I was shocked when I read things online that said things like, integrity can be hard to describe. Integrity can be hard to quantify or to see. And then the brilliant one that I loved was, you just know it when you see it. We can't say what it is, but you'll just know it. And so I put a simple question up on Facebook, and it was just simply this: what is integrity? And I got a lot of different responses, all kinds of answers, and as I was reading down through them, some of them were very good, and others, honestly, they just missed the mark. They had an idea, but it was misguided. And for some reason, integrity can be tricky to sum up. One blogger said this. I don't know how long it took him to come up with this sentence, but it says, a person of integrity displays a principled dedication to values and beliefs. They always seek to reflect ethical standards and do the right thing regardless of the circumstances. And as I thought about integrity, I read all these different definitions, but at the end of the day, I came down to this: I don't really care what all the definitions are. I want to know what integrity looks like in our lives. As a follower of Jesus, or someone checking Jesus out, someone wanting to grow in this area, what does integrity look like and how does it play out? What are some things we can do to get there? What are some things that we can do to improve in this area of integrity? Maybe you are like me, and I can get so frustrated, I can get so upset with myself because there can be some incongruent areas of my life where what I say matters and what I say is important to me doesn't always match up with how I live it out or how I flesh it out. They just kind of miss, and I don't get there. It can be frustrating. So I want to give you some things this morning that can help us to bridge this gap, this area. Let me give you a definition quickly that I think works well. Integrity is this: it's deciding to integrate my heart's values into my daily actions. It's to integrate my values, my heart's values, into the way that I talk and the way that I act and the way that I do and how I treat relationships. This idea of integrity, this word integrity comes from the word integrate. It's the ability to integrate the values of my heart into my daily actions. It's integrity. But probably the most important part of that whole definition is this: deciding. I've got to decide to do this. It's the key. No one has ever slipped into integrity. No one has ever got up in the morning and said, oops, I fell into integrity. You've got to make the action. It's something you decide on in life. And so I want to talk about what are some steps we can take? What are some things we can do to build this bridge to integrity? This morning, I'm going to focus on relationships, integrity in relationships, because relationships is something we all have in common. Whether it's a friend, a coworker, someone we're dating, a marriage, whatever. How do we have integrity in your relationships? The kind of integrity that builds solid relationships, that gives you a firm foundation, that will help that relationship to go to the next level, to be all that it can be. Obviously, it's got to come from God's Word. And so I'm going to show you quite a few scriptures this morning and some ideas along the way. Proverbs chapter 28 says this: better is the poor who walks in his integrity than he who is crooked, though he be rich. 1 Chronicles chapter 29 says, I know, my God, that you test the heart and are pleased with integrity. When we walk in integrity, it puts a smile on God's face. It makes God happy. Obviously, integrity is important to God, but I would argue integrity is also important to every one of us. I have not met a single person that ever has said this statement, ever made this statement: man, I sure hope this relationship I'm in doesn't have any integrity. I hope my coworker has no integrity. I hope my spouse, I hope my friend, whoever it is. Integrity is important in relationships. We all want integrity between our heart's values and our daily actions. And when we struggle, when these two pieces of the puzzle don't match up, it frustrates us. Let me just throw a couple of examples out there. There's millions of them. We might say, well, I don't want to be materialistic, but then we run around spending tons of money on things we don't really need to keep up with people we don't necessarily even like. And we fall into being materialistic. Or we say, man, I want to spend a lot of time with my kids. My kids are important. My kids are going to be my legacy down the road, and I want to spend a lot of time with them, and I want to pour into them, but then when we look back over the past week or the past month, we haven't spent any time with our kids. See, hearts, values, and actions don't line up. Or the idea, if you're married, man, I want to have these important, intimate conversations with my spouse. But when you look back over the past week, 2 weeks, month, there haven't been any, or you've struggled to do that. Integrity in relationships are important. And so I want to take a look at some things that we can build into our lives, some steps that we can take, daily things that we can do, practical things that we do that can help us with this. Because I'm willing to bet that most of us live with this gap between my heart's values and what I do. And we want to bring that gap closer to each other. I want you to realize if you find yourself there like I find myself there, don't get frustrated. Don't get upset. You're not the only one there. Everyone, if they are honest, they have that same gap. They have that same issue. I think everyone in all of time has struggled with this. The Apostle Paul, who I would argue was one of the greatest Christians to ever live. Listen to what he said, because he struggled with this. This is what he said about the gap. It's a great description. In Romans chapter 7, he says, "No matter which way I turn, I can't make myself do right. I want to, but I can't. I want to do good, I don't. And when I try not to do wrong, I do it anyway." Can anyone else relate to that? Man, I know I can. And then a few verses later, he says, "I don't understand myself at all. Why do I struggle with this?" Well, the frustration gap shows up in all areas of our life. And you really feel it in relationships. You really feel it in relationships, whether it's with your relationship in a family, whether it's a spouse, with your kids, with a coworker, with a friend. We struggle with it. And I'm going to show that there's real value in integrity for relationships, because integrity, here's what integrity does for a relationship. This is so important. Integrity builds trust into a relationship. And for a relationship to mature and a relationship to become all it can become, there's got to be this foundation of trust there. Trust is what fuels relationships. It pushes relationships forward. And so when you and I have integrity in our relationships, it builds trust. It builds trust. Let me share with you 3 benefits of integrity. The first one is this. First benefit I'm going to say is this, is protection. See, you have less fear in your relationship because security has come. The protection has come through integrity. It builds trust. The second one is security. You get security. You get this greater confidence. In Proverbs chapter 10, it says, "The man of integrity walks securely." So you get protection, you get security, and the third, you get guidance. You get better decisions. Integrity gives us this internal guidance system, and we just make better decisions. In Proverbs chapter 11, it says, "The integrity of the upright guides them." And so when you put these 3 things together, when you take protection, you take security, and you take guidance, and you push those things together, and then you plug them into any relationship. You make them part of any relationship. You have these attitudes going on in these relationships. You have that strength in your heart and your mind, and you're going to push forward. You will be a strength to that relationship. You'll make the relationship better. You'll make the relationship stronger. And it's a powerful thing. Because of your integrity, you will enable it to work and to be strong. Let me share a practical way that this works out. A lot of you know this. If you're new, you don't. But there's a family right down here in the front, Dave and Janice, Mandy, and Chris is up in the booth. We've been friends for a long time now, 20 plus years. We have built this integrity in relationships, so if they came to me and called me out on something, I may not want to hear it. It may even tick me off, but I know they come with honesty. I know they come with integrity because they want what's best for me and for my family or best for the situation. And so I'm going to trust that situation better because of the integrity we have built over time. That's how it works in our relationships. And that's what we need in our relationships. And so I want to share with you 4 practical things you can do this morning, things you can practice to grow in your integrity in relationships. The first one is this: speak honestly. Speak honestly. I'm going to say more about how to do this in a little bit, but speak honestly. It takes a lot of stress out of life. You've heard the Mark Twain saying, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. Speak honestly. Because when someone catches you in a lie, what happens? Trust goes what? Does trust go up when they lie to you, or does trust go down? Yeah, it goes down. Speak honestly. Speaking honestly is a very important part. Now let me take a quick side street here, a quick detour on this. We need to speak honestly, but the Bible gives a qualifier to that. The Bible tells us to speak honestly, but to do it biblically. It says in Ephesians chapter 4, it says, speak the truth in a spirit of love. So many people want to do the first part of that verse. They want to speak the truth. And they just throw it out there, then they just launch it. Some people speak truth in such a way that it actually damages the relationship or destroys the relationship more than builds it up. It's important to speak the truth. It's important to speak honestly, but at the same time, you've got to do it in a spirit of love. And so I have thrown this out there before, give you something to think about. Do you tell the truth, or do you launch the truth like a missile? Which one do you do? For those of you a little bit older, are you a Clint Eastwood type of truth teller? Do you just put it out there like a .44 Magnum and you just start shooting the truth all over the place and let the holes go and let the bodies fall? And then say, well, I told the truth. They got to suck it up, Buttercup. It was honest. It was true. That's not what the Bible says. It says to speak the truth in love. We got to say it lovingly. And so when we begin to speak honestly in love to people, man, it has a tremendous, tremendous impact on relationships. Dads, I want to pick on us for a quick second, another little detour. Our words to our kids are so powerful and they matter so much. In Proverbs chapter 20, it says, it is a wonderful heritage to have an honest father. Man, what an impact. What an impact. What a wonderful heritage. Dads, are you leaving that kind of heritage to your kids? Because I got to tell you, kids don't care about all of your accomplishments, everything they do. What really impacts their lives, the real heritage that you give them is character. It is a wonderful thing to have an honest father. You know, my dad was a great man. He had lots of shortcomings. He had lots of faults. But one thing you could count on my dad doing, if he said it, it was the truth. There was never any gray area. He may hurt your feelings. You may not like it because he wasn't always the best at the in love part, but he spoke the truth. I never had to wonder about that. Never had to question. It's a wonderful heritage. Now, this whole idea of speaking the truth, I could stop there and we could be done because most of us would walk away thinking, yeah, Mike, speaking the truth is a good idea. That's a great idea. Speaking with love is a great idea, but, and then we would fill it in. This is an area that I think we all can struggle with. We know we should tell the truth. We know we should speak honestly. To tell the truth, we would say it's a value in our lives. And this phrase runs through our mind. We say, well, honesty is the best policy. We tell our kids that, and we believe that, but we can also struggle with it. When we get in a certain situation, or we get in a certain discussion or a certain environment, we can really struggle in this area. Why is that? I think a lot of times it's not so much a lack of integrity in our lives as much as is the fear that we have of what if? What if I tell them this? What if I show that? What will happen when I tell the truth? At work, when I tell my boss the truth about his thought or her product or her idea, what will happen? But with my friend, if I'm really honest with them about this situation in their lives, are they going to hate me? If I tell the truth to my spouse, are we going to end up having this huge fight? So I'm just going to keep my trap shut. I'm going to keep it to myself and just live with it. That doesn't work, but that's a whole nother sermon. I'm going to be real honest here. Let's get real about honesty, about integrity. Being honest, it is a tremendous risk. It is. There is an element of risk to it. I mean, what would they really think? What would they really think if I told them the truth? What would my parents say if I told them the truth about whatever we're talking about? What would that look like? If I told my friend, if I told my boss, if I told my spouse, well, it's a risk. It is a risk. And oftentimes in our attempt to keep the peace, what do? We lie. We call it other things, but we lie. Mike, what's wrong? Nothing. Everything's okay. No problems going on here. It's a risk to tell the truth. In Ecclesiastes chapter 10, it says, there is risk in each stroke of your axe. It's a great word picture from the Old Testament. I'm going to guess most of you didn't grow up hillbilly country like I did. You probably didn't sharpen your own axe very often. I know what this is talking about here. But there's risk. But I don't care what you're doing in life. You can be doing the most simple thing in all of life, and there's a risk to it. There's risk in everything. There's risk in telling the truth. That is true, but there's also a tremendous risk. I would argue a bigger risk in not telling the truth. See, the risk in telling the truth is that things will blow up, that you'll go through a conflict, and you'll work through that conflict, you'll come out the other side. And if you work through the conflict properly, you'll come out the other side better. But there is the risk that it's going to blow up. But the risk in not telling the truth is that you'll gradually grow apart. And you'll get way down here, and your love for each other will fade, and it'll begin to fall, and it will go away. And so we try to avoid conflict. We don't like to have conflict all the times. And so often, just being real here, so often we have the choice of immediate conflict or growing gradually apart. And often we will pick this because we say, we'll deal with it at some point. At some point this will come up. At some point we'll have this discussion. Maybe it'll get better on its own. Maybe it'll get better later. Maybe we'll discuss it down the road, and it never does. You never actually have that discussion. You never actually get there. And the only way you can do that is eventually someone has to have the courage to tell the truth. A couple of years ago, I was doing some marriage counseling, and I told them, I said, you're just sucking the life out of me. We're done. And they looked at me, because that's not normally what you say in those situations. I was like, until one of you will be honest, I can't do much to help you. So when one of you have the guts, let me know. We'll get back together. It was probably about a month. Came back, they got honest, and we worked with it. We worked right through it, and they're doing great today. But if you're struggling with a relationship, whether it's a parent, a spouse, a friend, coworker, dating, kids, whatever it is, if right now you're thinking to yourself, man, he's right, I need to tell them the truth, I would encourage you to simply ask God right now to give you the courage to tell them the truth. But how do we tell the truth? In love. Speak it in love. Ask God to give you the courage to take the risk, because we need to speak honestly in love. Second, we need to confess regularly. We need to confess. Admit when we are wrong. Own up to it when we fall short. Own up to it when we make mistakes. In James chapter 5, verse 16, it says, admit your faults to one another and pray for each other. So often we want to say, I need to confess, but I'm just going to confess to God. I mean, isn't that enough? I'm just going to confess to God. Do we really need to confess to the other person? Do we really need to talk to the other person? Do we really need to ask this other person's permission to be forgiven? The answer is no. Forgiveness comes from God. There is some relationship forgiveness has to happen, but ultimate forgiveness comes from God. But that isn't the point. It's not what he's talking about here. In order to restore the relationship with that person, you got to talk to him. And part of talking to him is to confess what you did, what your part was in the situation, what your part is, whether you said something, whether you thought something, whether you've been harboring something. But to confess your part, it says, admit your faults to one another and pray for each other. One of the things I always do when I'm working with people in conflict, whether it's couples or friends, whatever it may be, at some point we get to the second part of this. I have them admit their part of the issue, but then I have them pray for the other person. It is amazing the power in taking that simple step, taking that one step. Because if you begin to get your arms around this, if you begin to understand it, you begin to admit when you're wrong, admit those thoughts you have. If you let the principle of forgiveness work in your relationship, I'm telling you, wide open the floodgates. the floodgates of forgiveness and a fresh joy and restoration takes place in relationships. Because here's the reality. In every relationship we have, there's two players. When it comes to conflict, especially within that relationship, there's two players. There's the offender and the offended. You are one or the other, most likely both. So we got to admit when we're wrong. We got to be willing to say, I was wrong. I did this. I had this thought. I had this attitude. I took this action. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? And then the other side of the equation has to say, I forgive you. And here's where I fell short. Here was my part of it. And when you do those things, man, the floodgates swing wide open. And relationships go to a higher level. They go to a deeper level, and people are seeking that. Now, admittedly, the hardest part, and I stink at this part of it, admitting we're wrong. I hate to say I'm wrong. I mean, you can ask Liz how many times she's heard this. Probably not enough. Actually, not enough. I hate to say that I was wrong. But we need to do it. We need to get it. And where do you get the strength to do that? You get it from God. You get it from God. It doesn't come from your own good character. You're not going to have enough strength on your own to do that. To admit you're wrong is tough, but it's found in Jesus. And He can give us the strength to do that, and we can ask Him to give me the strength to admit when I'm wrong. Give me the strength to ask for forgiveness. Give me the strength to confess. Give me the strength to forgive when I need to. So the first step we need to take is we speak honestly. Second, we confess regularly. Third, we live consistently. Pretty much one thing that all the writers agreed on this idea of integrity is the opposite of it. The opposite of integrity, pretty much everyone agreed on, was hypocrisy. And you might be able to hide it at church, you might be able to hide it at work, but this whole idea of living consistently at your house, man, that's what gets hard. It's easy to fake with other relationships, but when they see you all of the time and where the people know the real you, it can be hard there. Because it can be easy to pretend. But we should be asking God to help us to not play the game, to not pretend, to not wear the mask. We should be asking God a prayer that says something like this: help me to never be like that. Help me through your strength to have consistency in my life. Help me to live consistently. Let me give you 3 areas real quick to live consistently. First, public versus private. Your public versus your private image. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, He says, take care, don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired. Don't do it for show. Talking about motivation here. Check your motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing? So often our family actually gets the short end of the stick. Why is that? Well, why is it that we give them the short end of the stick and when we let them down just to build up our own public image? We need to watch that. Sometimes we forget how important our family is and we think, they'll love me no matter what. Man, that's a lie. That's not always true. We can lose their respect. We can lose their trust. And so I try to tell myself a couple of questions, remind myself of a couple of things. Who do I want to be admired by at the end of the day? At the end of the day, who really matters? Who do I want to be admired by? And our goal ought to be admired by those closest to us. And so we need to be consistent in our public life. The second area of consistency that is important is in discipline. Talking to parents here. Kids need consistency in their discipline. Ephesians chapter 6 talks about fathers bringing the children up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. And I'm just going to say it. If as a parent you've never struggled with consistency, you're a super parent. You're the most awesome parent ever, because I will say all parents have struggled with this, because being consistent in our discipline, man, that is hard. Sometimes you go to work and you have a bad day, or you have a fight with your spouse and the child does something that's really not that big of a deal, but man, disciplining them is easy. And then other days you've had such a great deal that they could be kicking the dog while you come in and beating their brother with the belt, and you're going to be like, hey, let's go get ice cream. It's all okay. I'm having a good day. It can be hard, but kids need this discipline that is consistent. And then the third area of consistency that's important is to be consistent between my words and my actions. Between my words and my actions. Hopefully you have never said, well, do as I say, not as I do. Hopefully you've never said that. It's better to say something like, man, Logan, shoot for what I'm shooting for. Aim for what I'm aiming for. I'm striving for something. I want you to strive for the same thing. I'm striving for this. Try to grow like I'm trying to grow in this area. I want to be more consistent in my words and my actions. Because words by themselves are not what's important. Words by themselves aren't going to impact people by themselves. But when our words and our actions come together and they align, real impact happens. That's when power takes place. 1 Samuel 16, God was talking about something a little different, but I think it relates to us. It says, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. See, I think those closest to us that know the real us, they don't look at the outside. They don't look at the outside. They see the same thing. They see our heart. They see who we really are, and that's what impacts them. That's what changes them. If you have a lifestyle filled with hypocrisy, if you have a lifestyle filled with inconsistency, you've kind of sort of gotten used to this over a long period of time. This is just how you operate. Man, make a decision to change. Drive that stake in the ground today and say, from this point forward, not that I'm not going to mess up, we're going to fall short on that, but from this point forward, I'm going to make a change. I am going to strive for my words and my actions to match up. I'm going to strive to have more integrity in my life. Because as you struggle to be consistent in these areas, and it is a struggle. It is a struggle, but you can develop in relations a depth of love, a depth of respect. That relationship can take on whole new meaning that you never even dreamed possible. Because you have the power of consistency. And then I think what helps us in consistency is this fourth thing we can do for integrity, and that is to commit openly. To commit openly. You must make up your mind in advance. That there's times in your life that you shouldn't wait to make up your mind. That there are just times in your life that it's not going to go well if you haven't made up your mind beforehand what you want to do. I've shared this example before, but it's a great example. I can't think of a better one. On this very stage, about right here, Liz and I got married. Jerry was doing our wedding. Can you imagine on that day if Jerry would have said, Mike, do you take Liz to be your lawfully wedded wife? And if I said, Jerry, give me a minute. I'll come back to you on that in just a few seconds. Can you imagine how that would have went? Not well. Not well. See, you make up your mind in advance. And I'm just suggesting in this area of integrity, decide beforehand who you are. Decide beforehand what integrity looks like in your life. See, I'm encouraging us, if you are a follower of Jesus, I'm encouraging you to follow Jesus in this and to become more like Him in this area, to be like God in this area. In Isaiah chapter 45, it says, I publicly proclaim bold promises. I do not whisper obscurities in some dark corners so that no one will know what I mean. Let people know where you stand. Tell someone. Tell someone. If you're going to have integrity and you're going to make a change, tell someone that you're going to make this change. If you want to make a change with your kids, tell them, man, I know I've fallen short in the past, but from this day forward, I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to work on it. Will you help me do it? Will you pray with me about this? Tell the right people. But commit publicly. Because, man, the importance of voicing our commitment plays such an important part. It's huge. It's huge. And when we tell someone that they can help us, and they can help us be accountable in that. That's why I tell people all the time, if you want to go on your faith journey, if you want to become more like Jesus, tell someone that you're going to do it. Or if you want to give your life to Jesus, tell someone that you want to do it. If you want to be part of a church, tell someone. If you need to pray about something, tell someone. If you need to struggle with something and you're struggling with something and you want to overcome it, tell someone, ask them to help you through it. Just openly committing that, publicly saying it, helps us so much. So let me wrap this up. What do you need to work on the most? Of the 4 things I shared this morning, speak honestly, confess regularly, live consistently, or commit openly. Which of those 4 do you need to work on the most? Remember, I said integrity is deciding to integrate my heart's values into my daily actions. I love what one writer said I was reading this week. He says, choose wisely because you are responsible for your conduct. But you are also responsible for your integrity. Choose your words and actions to be consistent with your values and beliefs. So I'm going to close this morning with 2 scriptures for you. And this is my prayer for every one of us in this area of integrity. The first one comes from Psalm 101, verse 2. It says, I will walk in my house in the integrity of my heart. I will walk. Both of these verses say, I will walk. It's an action. I will walk in my house in the integrity of my heart. And the second one says, so you will walk in the way of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, that is my prayer for each and every one of us. Whether we've been following you for a long time or we're checking you out for the very first time, integrity is important. It's an important part of our life. It is something that you call us to. But man, integrity is so important in relationships. Lord, help us. It is not easy. It is not simple. Help us to walk in the integrity of our heart. That what we believe in our heart comes out in our words, comes out in our actions, comes out in our thoughts. But Lord, I specifically pray that for those of us who are following you, that we will follow you more closely. For those checking you out, I pray that they would check you out in authenticity, that they would ask the questions that they want to ask, that they would keep seeking answers from you. But Lord, for those that claim to be followers of yours, claim to be disciples of yours, Lord, help us to walk in the way of the good and to keep the paths of righteousness, which come directly from your word. Lord, that's not always simple. That's not always easy. Sometimes we will read something, we're like, I'm not sure about that. But help us to take you at your word. You've been faithful in the past. Your word has always been true. Your word has always worked. Help us to lean in that reality, lean into that reality when we doubt it in the future. Lord, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your grace, and I thank you for your forgiveness. That we can come to you and we can ask for forgiveness, and you do so willingly. And you help us from that point on to walk with you. Lord, help us to grow in this area of integrity. Whether it's to speak honestly, whether it's to confess regularly, maybe it's living more consistently, where it's more congruent in what we say we believe and what we live out. But to do all that, help us to commit openly to someone that we trust. Lord, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your grace. I thank you for the relationship we can have with you. I thank you for the relationships we get to have in life. Help us to do what we can to make those relationships stronger each and every day as we walk in integrity more and more. And all this I pray in the powerful name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.